of any landlord is to have multiple, well-qualified applications vying for their rental listing. However, if that becomes a reality, how do you decide? While this can seem like a good problem to have, it actually puts landlords in a difficult spot. So today we walk you through how to choose a tenant for your rental property when you have multiple qualified applications. Hey everyone, it's Alyssa here from Bay Property Management Group, bringing you the latest industry news, tips, and advice for owners, investors, and tenants. So let's get started. Using a written list of criteria to make decisions is important. Furthermore, this helps property owners and managers avoid accusations of unfairness or discrimination lawsuits. That said, ensure your list of criteria is compliant with the Fair Housing Act before putting it into practice. Also, make sure the qualifications and how they are presented remain consistent throughout each applicant interaction and application. If landlords make an exception for one tenant but not for another, they could easily find themselves accused of discrimination. Before landlords ever list a property for rent, they must establish these written guidelines for how to choose the best tenant. Creating a set of application qualifications helps set a baseline for all prospective tenants. However, the key here is consistency. So ensure that each applicant is made aware of the qualifications and that they remain the same for each applicant. A few examples of standard screening criteria to help landlords choose between multiple tenants include: Number 1, a minimum credit score. While the numerical score is not everything, use a credit report to see the applicant's overall financial health. Any applicant with excessive debt, overdue accounts, or poor repayment history is not the best fit for your rental property. Number 2, rental and eviction history. Landlords should steer clear of applicants with a poor rental history that includes lease breaks, early terminations, or evictions. Number 3, minimum monthly income. Verifying income is the simplest form of screening in the application process. That said, an applicant's financial documents should show a minimum gross income of 3 times the monthly rent, thus ensuring they can afford the rent along with their other obligations. Number 4, landlord and professional references. Documents tell a story, but not as much as person-to-person contact. So request contact information for previous or current landlords, an employer, or other professional references. Then take the time to contact them and ask open-ended questions to gain as much insight as you can. Number 5, criminal background. Criminal background checks can be a slippery slope depending on local or state regulations. For instance, some states do not allow landlords to discriminate against applicants convicted of certain crimes. That said, a record of violent crimes or drug convictions are an exception where landlords could deny an applicant. Once you have your list of application criteria, make sure each tenant meets the standard guidelines set forth. Landlords may be able to eliminate some applicants based on this list alone, which helps narrow down the pool of qualified tenants. So what happens if more than one qualified applicant applies for your property? After all, the tenant you choose is directly tied to the success or failure of the lease term. Ideally, owners want someone who will pay rent on time, report maintenance concerns promptly, and care for the property as if it were their own. When it comes to narrowing down the field of applicants, a landlord has 2 main options to choose from. The idea is to remain fair and follow good business practices. Let's examine these methods a little further. Method number 1, first come, first served. Arguably the simplest way to handle how to choose the best tenant for your property when all applicants are truly equally qualified is to go with a first come, first served approach. In other words, choose amongst the qualified applicants based on when the application was submitted. Although this method is fairly straightforward, it does mean that the most qualified applicant may not be the eventual renter. Therefore, if this is a concern, consider the next method for further evaluating each option more carefully. Remember, whatever method you choose, it must remain consistent. Method number 2, sort based on application strength. When multiple applications meet all of the standard qualifications, it does present a quandary. So a first come, first served does not make you comfortable. Delving deeper into each applicant is the only way to come to a decision. That said, landlords may end up choosing the applicant with the higher income, better rental history, or the soonest move-in date. Regardless, ensure that you document the reasons why one applicant is deemed more qualified than another, just in case a dispute arises. Therefore, when deciding how to choose the best tenant for your rental, re-examine the following criteria and carefully weigh the differences between applications. That information could prove to be the deciding factor. Be sure to review applicant reference checks. Any great list of screening criteria should include a specific number of required references. However, are you calling and interviewing those references every time a tenant applies? If not, you should start doing so right away. Interviewing tenant references helps landlords gain insight into how that tenant will behave, regardless of how qualified they seem on paper. So here are a few good questions you should ask every potential tenant reference. Were there any late rental payments? If late rent payments were a regular issue in the past, they will probably be a regular issue in the future too. Did the tenant receive any noise complaints? The last thing you want is a noisy, disruptive tenant who trashes your property or annoys the neighbors. Was the property well maintained by the tenant? If severe damage occurred in the past, watch out. The tenant will likely treat your property poorly too. Additional tenant reference check questions to consider include: how long was their tenancy? Why did the tenant leave? Would you rent to this tenant again? Why or why not? What could this person do to be a better tenant? Did they smoke or have pets? Can you confirm this person's employment at your company? How long have you known them? What are the average hours the applicant works? How do they spend their spare time? And how would you describe their overall character? Keep in mind that money isn't everything when it comes to choosing the best tenant. Maybe you're considering 2 tenants but feel faced with a financial dilemma. The first tenant can move in this week but only barely meets your minimum qualifications and has paid rent late a time or 2. Meanwhile, the second tenant is extremely qualified with a stellar rental history but will need to wait a month before moving in. So how does a landlord know how to choose the best tenant? Well, in this situation, if possible, choose the second one. Yes, you might miss out on some quick cash by not renting out the property immediately, but the better tenant is worth the wait. Furthermore, owners can feel confident knowing they have the best chance of rent being paid on time, making your job as a landlord much less stressful. Once landlords decide on an applicant, the next step is handling the applicants you do not choose. Remember, in order to avoid disputes, it is vital to document why one applicant was chosen over another. When deciding how to choose the best tenant and following through on that decision, consider these guidelines. Consistency matters. Make sure you pick one selection method to use consistently when faced with multiple qualified tenants. Document everything. That way your documentation is consistent and it does not look like the landlord made any unfair exceptions for specific tenants. Send a notice. Send a letter to the tenants who applied but did not get the rental property. If they failed to get the property due to their credit score, you must let them know in accordance with the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Additionally, if they were denied for other reasons, explain those reasons in your letter and clearly state the criteria used to make your decision. And know the law. The best way for landlords to protect themselves against lawsuits is to know and follow the law. Fair housing law is essential, but there are also state and local laws that govern the landlord-tenant relationship every property owner needs to know. If you have doubts about how to choose the best tenant or whether your screening processes are legally compliant, consider consulting a local attorney or a qualified property management team. Additionally, landlords can research local landlord-tenant laws and requirements on their own. However, this might take some time and effort on your part, but it will be well worth it in avoiding a lawsuit or tenant conflict. For more advice on a variety of other issues important to the rental industry, subscribe to the Bay Property Management Group channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss out on exclusive content. Also, be sure to check out our blog via the link in the description below for tips on tenant screening, along with everything from home maintenance to financing your first income property purchase. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up or leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.